Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 7 of the Cold Outreach Sales Olympiade. My name is Beck. It's always Beck. It always has been. How's everyone doing out there? Everyone alive, feeling good. We're in day 7, so we're just under about halfway through the Olympics. So it has been a absolute wild ride. I hope everyone has had a good week. It's Thursday. We're almost there, y'all. And keep in mind, everyone needs to set their clocks tonight. Not that that's the thing that you do for this, but tomorrow is Friday the 13th. So I'm a little scared of what's going to happen tomorrow. So tomorrow is Friday the 13th, and then we have Valentine's Day. Don't forget to pick up stuff for your loved one after they get, Friday the 13th. Who knows what's going to happen scary on that day, but you can recoup from it by buying them a nice Valentine's Day gift. Anywho, none of that's relevant today. Today, we're going to go into objection handling. This is a very good topic. It is a very non-meta topic, especially for me. Meaning it's less about the meta conversation, more of in the moment. How do we handle objections, or how do we, when objections come up in several different contexts? Objections in terms of sales cycle, objections in terms of the cold call that you're having, or over cold email. Some people even send them over that, and to be spicy. How do you handle those? And then we're also on the back end going to pair in a topic of voicemails. So this is a really tactical session on prospecting that I'm excited to cover. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in? So the first slice of the pie that I wanted to go into is why buyers sling objections in the first place. This is the only meta topic that we're going to have, or only meta slice of the pie we're going to have. By the way, I want to hear from you. I forgot about it. The sleep lackage is kicking in. So if you're out there, I want to hear who's in here. How's it going? How's the week going? What is your favorite and least favorite Olympic moment that has happened so far? Mine is still Andrea Bocelli. I'm sorry. It's still Andrea Bocelli, but I want to hear from everyone in the chat before we get, completely down into business. So why buyers sling objections in the first place? So from a high level, an objection is just a blocker. It's something to slow you down. So really from the high level, like the the eye view, if you will, an objection is coming about because they notice that you have an agenda to do something. So they're trying to block you from doing something that you're trying to accomplish. And usually you're trying to accomplish something through them. So in the cold call or cold email instance, they're trying to throw an object up in your way to slow you down from whatever it is you're trying to do. And what's important to think about is this isn't necessarily you're trying to do something bad to them, or you're trying to go after something that isn't completely what they wanted. It's that you're trying to pursue something that they don't even know, like they're not a part of it other than you want something from them. So it could be you have an agenda and they start to notice it. So, and why they're trying to slow you down is essentially, well, number one, agenda. They don't know if it's to their advantage or not. But number two is fear. It's not that I don't want whatever you're offering. I don't even know yet because I don't know who you are in a lot of case scenarios. But I'm trying to evaluate. I'm like, is this good? Is this bad? How would I use this? So they're trying to slow you down. So where the term actually comes from is it's a late Latin term. It's combined with a late Latin term and a French term. I always bring the French back in. I love you, France. Miss you, France. It is from two combined terms, which means a reply or retort that you throw at someone. But the party who did the first throwing was us. So when prospects feel this, especially, you have to keep in mind, they're starting to feel like they're on a list, like you're trying to get something from them. And so they're trying to, and they know that it's not a special instance. So objections can't happen, like from the fundamental view, they can't happen unless someone is trying to do something to someone else. So I'm trying to book a meeting. I'm trying to even involve a decision maker. I'm trying to get to the next step. I'm trying to get procurement involved. I'm trying to get you to hurry up. I'm trying to, get you to sign. It doesn't even have to be just in the holistic level that you're trying to get someone to buy. It's that you're trying to get them to do something that you want them to do. Whether that's, you want them to push you to the next level, you want them to involve the CFO because that's advantageous to you. And again, the goal isn't necessarily bad. It's just that it's completely self-serving to your to what you're trying to pursue. So they're just trying to solve their problem. They're trying to solve as many problems as they can, as quickly as they can, and the most egregious ones that are going to hurt them as much as possible as they can, and with the lowest budget as they can to be effective at their role. And our agenda is we're trying to sell, or we're trying to book the meeting, or we're trying to, X, Y, and Z. But every single action and every single desire that we have is in line with our agenda. Our agenda ultimately is we're trying to get them to sell. So to do that, I think that I need to get a decision maker on the line, or my goal is to sell this quickly. So to do that, I need to, get through procurement. Or, it can even be as small as I'm trying to get this entire committee to buy in. So to do that, I need to get them to agree on the problem to solve, or I'm trying to win this person over. So to do that, I need to get them, I need to build a relationship with them, or I need to compliment them, or I need to be super nice to them, or you'll see salespeople laughing at a joke, or, I need to be super accommodating to them, so that they'll like me, so that hypothetically they'll buy. So it can come out a million different ways in terms of how it affects our actions. And their agenda is also going to come out in a million different ways of how they're trying to accomplish that. So for instance, you'll see someone who's trying to buy, effectively and quickly and at as low risk as possible and price as possible. The reason that they won't tell us a lot of times the depth of their pain or the depth of what they're trying to do is they don't trust that our agenda is their agenda. So if I want to solve something at the lowest price point possible, it'd be disadvantageous to me as a buyer to give you the information of how many competitors I have, or how many alternatives I have. Because if I only have one, then you find more justification to hold your guts in pricing, because you know that I'm the only option. So this doesn't just come into regards of like from a business perspective. It's also from the perspective of there is a game at play. So a great book to read is Games People Play by Eric Byrne. But essentially what he understood is there's a certain amount of roles people play when they're trying to play this game, and the game that's at deck. And that's why people, he goes into, which he was much ahead of his time. He goes into one of the games that people play is buying and selling. So the reason people love to buy, but they hate to be sold to, is because a game is being played and we're on the opposite team. So, and it's not necessarily a bad team. It's just a team with a completely different agenda. So I can't completely open up to you and trust you because you're not on my team. So the 5 most important minutes to any meeting is after the meeting ends, any sales call, for instance, if it's live in person, is after the meeting ends, salesperson walks out and they turn to their peer and they say, "What do you think?" And that's when they tell the truth. They're like, "Oh, well, I liked this, because of this, and I didn't like this. I didn't really like how they, X, Y, and Z." And they tell the complete truth, not because the person has the character of they're very trustworthy, but because they have the bedrock of that they're on that person's same team. So I think about it in terms of like a conference. If you went to a conference and you saw your main competitor, it has a booth across from you, and you were to meet one of the other sellers, I can't think of any case scenario where a seller would say like, "These are the accounts that, hey, nice to meet you. These are the accounts that I'm working on. These are the deals. These are the ones I think might close." The reason I'd be like suicide to go do that is because I'm handing them information about my internal setup, which they could then use to hurt me because they're trying to accomplish their agenda. Their agenda in this case scenario is mutually exclusive from mine. If they sell them, I don't, kind of thing. And so in our instance, in a lot of cases, the agenda is also mutually exclusive, unfortunately. We're trying to sell and they're trying to solve their problem. They're not on paper exclusive, but I'm trying to solve my problem, and I'm not in any case scenario, because people shouldn't be, I'm not 100% confident that this solution is going to actually work. So even if I move forward with the solution, I'm still not confident that it's going to work. So I want to reserve as much capital as I can and as much time and credibility as I can to try something else if this doesn't work. So what we want is to go to the decision maker, what they like, someone that's quote unquote beyond them. We want everyone internally to know that we're selling because that helps us with selling. But if I'm trying to solve a problem and I'm not confident it's going to work, I want you to talk to as few as people as possible. My goal is to gatekeep you. Your goal is to get through. My goal is to buy this at the lowest price point possible. So I don't make it. So, if I have to pivot, then I have the capital to do it. You want to sell at the highest price point possible. So because that environment exists and people will say like sellers lie, and I'm like, well, amen. And then sellers will be like, well, buyers lie. And I'm like, well, amen. And the reason everyone's lying to one another is they are changing information or withholding information because information is power and will help that person accomplish their agenda. So the reason that this war has existed, like this battle between buyers and sellers, buyers and sellers and buyers and sellers, is not from a character perspective. And a lot of case scenarios were the buyer, a lot of case scenarios were the seller. It's because they're not on the same team, period. I can't root for, I went to team figure skating the other day, and I can't root for someone to do well on, let's say team Italy, if I'm on team France. Why? It's not I'm a jerk. It's that them getting their agenda hurts me from getting my agenda. So they sling an objection because you're not on their team to slow you down from their your agenda. So they evaluate, is it going to hurt them or is it not going to hurt them? It can look 1,000 million different ways, but it's just an object. And it's not completely to halt you. It's something to also think about, because our body has to evaluate a certain amount of things. That's why you can't walk down the road and absorb all the stimulus at once. Your body would implode. So you have the RAS system, that's basically sitting at the bottom of your brainstem, helps you pivot to what's important based on what's abnormal, just to evaluate. So they're trying to evaluate in that moment. They're like, I'm going to slow you down, but not stop you, because I want to ask more questions so I can evaluate whether this is something that will hurt me or help me. Okay, lap 2. That was a spicy lap. This is speed skating on the background, so we're going to speed right through. Okay, no more jokes back. No one likes them. Okay, I like them sometimes. Okay, most common objection handles. This is a very spicy topic. So we're all special snowflakes, but we're not in the regards of we all do the same amount of patterns. And the reason we develop a pattern in our head is because you can't learn how to do something new every single time that you do it. That's why, so an example of this, one of the most exhausting things in the beginning and one of the more exhausting things here for me now, but it's not so much when I'm in France, is when I moved internationally. Now I have to figure out every single day. I remember talking to my dad saying, it's like you're almost like a baby again. You have to relearn how to do everything, which are tasks that you normally know how to do. Of like, why is this door handle? How do I get this lock open? It's different. Or the shower handles work differently. Or where are the eggs? Why are they not in the refrigerator? Because they're over on a shelf. They don't keep them in the refrigerator. Or do they have cottage cheese? No, they don't have cottage cheese. Or they don't have a credit card system, right? So you have to rethink and reevaluate, okay, based on the rules here, now how do I do that? And it's an exhausting process, because you're like, just to figure out how do I buy, carpet stain remover, for instance, which is something that I needed. How do I do that? Where do they keep it? It's in completely different language. And so having to do that for every single task can really wear on you. So you default to how humanity has adapted and progressed is we evaluate certain things and then we set a pattern. So the next time that we know how, now there's things in France that I know how to do. Why? Because I've done it before. When I came to Italy, it's a whole new set of rules. Like for instance, there is Uber Eats in France. There's no Uber Eats here. So I'm like, okay, based on this new set of rules, I had to go back to basically square one. Now it's a completely different language. Now there's a new set of rules that I have to relearn. So we develop patterns for everything, literally everything. How we communicate. Hi, how are you? I'm good. How are you? How was your weekend? Very common, normal patterns. Or, like just like literally every single task. I'm thinking of every single task, even objections, we come up with a pattern. And so a lot of times we borrow a pattern that we've seen from different people, even from the emotional view when you grow up. So in games people play, Eric goes into, essentially there's 3 different ego states: parent, child, and adult. And parent ego state, what it's built off of, it's the ego state that essentially the whole goal of it is to control and protect the child ego state. But where you learn how to do that is the pattern that was set for you when you were younger. So you're borrowing all of the habits and the sayings and what it looked like when you were younger from your parents and parental figures. How did they how did they handle it when they were disciplining someone? What were some of the terms that they used whenever you were in timeout? And you subsume naturally a vast majority of those because it helps you construct the behavior that you should entail whenever you are in the parent ego state and whenever you're teaching someone something, for instance. So, I mean, it's fascinating. You can change the patterns, but the pattern is usually heavily ingrained in someone. So, I mean, for example, this is a crazy example, but I can't think of one that works even better than this one. When you think of a certain dialect, or like in the UK, they obviously have an accent. But it's not like someone was born in England and because they were born in that geo, that they were born with an accent. It's that they're borrowing how it sounded like to talk from everyone else around them. Or what's normal of, like, I remember I was watching this gentleman in the Middle East, and he was someone had sent him peanut butter, and he was taking the peanut butter and he was feeding it to one of his animals because he's like, "What's this?" Because it's abnormal to him. Vegemite in Australia is like the go-to. They don't like peanut butter. We eat Vegemite, or at least I have, and I'm like, "What is this?" Because it's not normal because of patterns that were given to us by other people. What is normal to us is set from in an ongoing fashion of what's around us. So what that has to do with sales is we have created a certain amount of sales objections and a certain amount of way that we handle those that are the normal pattern. So the objections that happen, I mean, they pivot a little bit from company to company, but we have learned what it means to be a buyer. Send me an email. I'm running into a meeting and I thought that this was somebody else. I'm in a meeting and I took the call because I thought you were my doctor. No budget, not the right person, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of these, some of them aren't even valid, meaning they're just throwing one out there because, again, they need an object. It could be a stool, it could be a can, it could be a desk, but they just need an object to slow you down. So they throw one out there, and you'll see people handle that objection of, they're like, "I'm not the right person." They're like, "Well, typically speaking, and they're like, now's not a good time, or send me an email." And the rep will handle it, which I'll get into the accounts of how they handle it. They're like, "Well, typically speaking," or are you going to read and what's in that email? Or what should I include in that email that would be hyper relevant to you? And even if it was brand new, it's not. They've heard that before. You'll see them just pivot objections. They're like, "No, well, I'm not the right person. No, well, you don't have budget. No, it's not the time internally." And the fact is, it doesn't matter what object they're using to them. So if you take out one of those objects, they just throw another object because the goal still stays the same. They're like, "I need to get this person to go away, and I don't want to be mean. So I'm going to just use whichever one of these I can. And if it works, great, they let me off the phone. But if not, I'm just going to give them 4 or 5 different other ones." But the culprit is they don't see the value in staying on the phone or giving you whatever you want. So they're going to throw one up there. It for the lion's share, especially for cold call and cold email. So just like they have objection patterns, "Not the right person, send me an email," using somebody already, Now's not the best time, no budget, we're just not in the right space, like da, da, da. They all sound essentially the same, like they're the same from company to company, because we've learned what it means to be a buyer. So as a seller, we have also learned what it means to quote unquote handle those objections. So the most common ones that I hear, for instance, for send me an email is either the rep will take it, or they'll say, oh, what should I include that email? Or that one stopped working. So some people will say, well, are you actually going to read this email? Or what's better than a live conversation? Or so I don't send over something that's irrelevant. What would you like for me to include to make the best use of your time? And the problem isn't necessarily that it's a bad objection handle. It's just that that's how every rep is doing it. They're trying to get you off the phone. You're like, what should I include in the email? And they're like, what they're really thinking is, I don't know. I don't even know who you are. I don't know what your company is. If I don't even really know what your company is, essentially what it's like to work with you, how would I know what content you should send over to get your agenda done more of that I should book a meeting? So the most common ones are send me an email. Oh, well, what should I include? Or oh, what's better than a live conversation? If it's not the best time to call right now, they'll say, when's a better time to call? The prospect will struggle. They're like, and then you'll hear the seller give an option. How's Friday at 9? And they're like, awesome. And all of a sudden you'll see a flip. The buyer's like, awesome. Because Friday at 9, they're not going to jump on the call. They're like, great, you're going to go away and I get rid of you. And you seem to be super happy about it. But the objection is they're setting the meeting when they're not going to show up. Or we don't have budget for this. And I'll hear people say, well, I hear that a lot, but when people see the value and they're like, hugs for the education, they hang out. Or they'll say, I'm already using blank. I'm already using somebody for this. We already have this covered. And one of the ways that they'll go is, well, are you saying that they're not doing anything wrong? Or what's one thing that they could do better? Or they'll say, we don't actually compete with that person. We're partners with them. They're partners with us. And they're like, hugs for the education. They still hang out. So the most common objections have a pattern for how we handle them. Or I'll hear, we have no budget. Oh, well, if I only talked to the teams that had budget right now, I wouldn't be talking to anyone. Or is this a sales call? And people will say, yeah, but don't you have sellers on your selling team? And we're taking logic to try and in a competitive way combat their objection without addressing the culprit that they don't see value in talking to us. Another thing I think is important to note, a lot of the objection handles that I hear, or a lot of the objection counters that I hear being taught, is we're trying to assign what's important to us to them. Of like, for the instance of is this a sales call? And we're like, yeah, but don't you have sellers too? And what would you think about a leader that didn't take the sales call? And we're like taking what's important to us. And we're like, yeah, but from the moral perspective, shouldn't this be important to you? People don't care. And they shouldn't. They care about what's important to them in terms of what problems are they trying to solve. We can't expect we shouldn't have people take a meeting because they're nice. Even if they do, the business value isn't there for them. I've seen campaigns where people send over gifts and the person will meaning if you jump on this call, you get headphones. Everyone thinks they're super successful because they set a lot of meetings. But the conversion rate on those, the highest I've seen is like 3% into close one, because they're jumping on the call to get their motive, which is the headphones. We can't barter people into meetings. We can't expect them to take a meeting because they're nice. We shouldn't. We can't make it they're taking a meeting because they feel like because they'll feel like a bad person if they don't. We need to make it in their best interest to take the meeting. Once you do that, excuse me, see Italian dog in the background. Everything will change. Think of them if they are going to only operate in a way that's in their best interest. Take in the box, which is not true, but take in the box that they are a person that's completely self-consumed And they're only going to do something when it's for their benefit. When I find an unknown for someone on a cold call, it's to their best benefit to take the next call. If I find 3 unknowns, even though I don't solve for them, in their head, they'll take the discovery call and they're thinking, I might not buy, but at minimum, I'll learn something about how to solve my problem. If they found 2 unknowns, I'll learn something about how to solve my problem. So it's worth it to me to take the meeting either way. Know that, embody that, and I wouldn't even get mad at that. They're trying to figure out how to solve their problem, run this math through. And if they learn so much on a discovery call, on a cold call, that it's worth it for them to take a discovery call just to learn about solving their problem, you're already in the win. They learn how to solve their problem better whenever they're around you, which that's why people buy to begin with. So they're like, I can learn how to solve my problem more effectively with this person. That's credibility. That's not an object. That's credibility. So when you view it from, I need to make it to where it's in their best interest, business, role-wise, etc., to spend more time with me. That's when we start thinking the thoughts that will help us on the cold calls. Okay, let's go into lap 3. Lap 3. Okay, so now that we've gone through the most common objection handles, why they won't work, let's go into 3 common objection types, the 2 questions to ask to differentiate. So there's only 3 types of objections from a meta level. They're completely different in nature. One is the more normal than the others, it happens more frequently. There are shallow objections, and what I mean by that is it's just a random excuse. It means nothing. It means I want you to go away. So there's no backing to it. There's not necessarily any truth to it. There's no validity to it. It's just something, it's an object to just make you go away. And then there's real but invalid. So there's shallow objections and real, and there's valid and invalid. Shallow is just a throwaway excuse. Real is they actually believe it. It's a reason of why they can't do something that actually has some backing. It's not a shell excuse to get you to go away. It's something of why an actual reason of why I can't buy. But within real, you have valid and invalid. Invalid being defined as it's not correct what they're saying, and valid being defined as it is correct. So you only really have 3 types of objections. You have shallow, real, invalid, meaning it's correct. They mean it, but it's not correct what they're saying. They're like, I'm using a competitor, and you're like, we don't even compete with them. Or they're like, you're the most expensive in market, but you're the least expensive in market. So they mean it as a real reason, but it's not true what they're saying. And then the third type is real but valid, meaning they mean it and it is correct what they're saying. So the way to tell the difference, and the context will help you a lot. Meaning like, is this cold call? Is it cold email? Is this a first discovery call, etc.? So you have shallow objections, just an excuse, real but invalid. They believe it, but it's not true. And then you have real and valid. They believe it and it is true. So the questions that I'm trying to ask to tease those out, and I would think about the context, meaning, is it a cold call? Is it a discovery call? Have you met with them before, et cetera? That helps you. But the 2 questions that I would ask in my own head, I don't ask them, is for shallow, I'm wondering, do I believe that this person actually believes that? And the second question is this correct or not correct? So I'm first trying to differentiate, is this shallow or is this real in my head? And if it is real, then is it correct or is it not correct or incorrect based on what I know? So let's start with some of the details that will give you some of the context. For shallow, and you're going to know, everyone's smart on this line. You're going to know just inherently, just like our buyers know when we're trying to sell, it's going to come through pretty easily, especially if you're really paying attention to it. So shallow, for starters, in terms of percentages, On a cold call, 95% of the time, they're going to be shallow. For a cold email response, you have a much higher likelihood that it's real, but I'm still going to give it a 60-40 split, 60 in terms of shallow. The reason being, cold email, if I don't want to if I don't want a meeting, I just don't respond. Cold call adds the element of there's a person in front of you, so they have to get someone to go away. But I'd still give it a 60-40 split. Discovery, it depends on how early it is within the meeting, but discovery, you're going to have a lot more real objections because they're spending more time, right? So they've thought it through because they thought through the time to even take the call. So I'd say on cold call, 95% likelihood that it's shallow. That's the first thing that I'm thinking about. The second thing that I'm thinking about is the level of detail behind it. Shallow objections will have the fewer details. Real objections will have increased details. One of the things I see in role play, for instance, with when reps are like learning training, they hate role play. And I completely understand that, because even if I were to try to do an effective role play, from my view, a role play is to find things that they don't know. So it's based on things that they believe and know, and based on a lot of internal data. So the hypothetical buyer, would need to know a lot about the internal situation. If you're just trying to do the objection handling exercise, completely different. But that's the point of that's not what our buyers are about. So point being, the level of detail that you would have to know is that buyer, the level of detail that's encompassed around it and in the objection, higher the detail, higher the likelihood that it's real. So if I just say, send me an email, that's not a lot of level of detail. If I'm like, we're using this current company, I don't know if they compete with you, blah, 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 but it seems like you have some overlap. We just hired them in 6 months. Okay, I'm like, that one's real, because the level of detail. The next one is the level of narrative behind it. And is it something that just triggered recently? I'll give you an instance. No budget is the classic sales version of a shallow objection. No budget for you. But in March in 2020, no budget became real. COVID hit. People were terrified, rightfully so. So they started slicing budgets in half to conserve. So that's a real side of no budget, but they can sound the same. So I'd use that level of narrative, especially if you've been hearing it recently. The next one is the temperament of the prospect. So the happier the prospect, the more likelihood that it is real. If they sound quippy or pissed, it's likely shallow. They don't know who you are and they don't care. They're pissed for whatever reason, they want to get you off the phone. If they're really, really nice, if they're nicer and they're more open and they're talking to you and blah, 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 I would say more likelihood that it's real. Now, there's still a huge percentage chance that it could be invalid, meaning it's incorrect what they're assuming, but more likelihood that it's real. And then the last one is how much they know your company or space, what it sounds like beforehand. I would think through the math of, from a scale of 1 to 10 for you, how much do you know your own product? Meaning everything about your company, everything about the products, everything that it can do, all the ins and outs, integration. Usually what I hear from people in the market is around a 4 of I know my own products. Then I think about, for a current customer, how much do they know you? I don't know, probably 2. For someone who's used you in the past, or is someone who's heard of you but isn't a current customer, how will they know you? 1. For someone who doesn't even know who you are, how well do they know you? 0. So if they say not the right person, but they don't even know who you are, how do you know? Reps will take at face value. They're like, they said they're not the right person. I'm like, yeah, but they don't even know what your company is, and they're the right buyer persona. Yes. And I'm like, yeah. So they are the right person. How would they know where to reach you if they don't even know what the company is? So the more that they've known you beforehand and they've heard of your company or of your space, et cetera, the more likelihood that it's real. Because if they've known about you or about your company for a long period of time, if they're not using you, it's for a reason. Now, it might be for an invalid reason, but it's still for a reason. So they have thought through and they're like, oh, well, I can't use blank because of X, Y, and Z, because, we would have to hypothetically use it in this case scenario. They've done that math. Again, it still could be invalid, meaning completely incorrect. sellers live in the incorrect. Sorry, good sellers live in the incorrect. That's what I'm after, is finding the things that they don't know and things that they've missed and things that they're mistaken about. Like, that's the whole point of selling, to help them. But the point is that they have a lot of assumptions. Some of them are invalid. Some of them aren't correct. If they don't even know the company, they haven't even developed any assumptions, which means it only points to one thing. They want you to go away, and they're going to say something to make that happen. So 2 questions I'm asking my head is this shallow or real? Meaning, do I believe that it, based on level of deep detail, temperament, the context, have they mentioned you before, the narrative, et cetera, and the statistics? I'm like, cold call, it's very likely shallow. Do I believe this is shallow or real? Meaning it's just a throwaway, or they actually believe it. And then for the 5% on cold calls, for instance, that are real, is it valid or invalid? Invalid meaning it's incorrect, and valid being it's correct. So the fun thing is, really, when it comes to objection handles, we only have 2 types of objection handles, because real invalid ones, meaning they're like, they believe it and it's actually true. It's easy. They believe it. It's true. It means it's a stopper. They don't have an integration. So, they don't have the integration. They can't buy. So that one's easy. But the outstanding 2 are the other former. Man, I am smoking this in terms of time. Who is that? That's France. I know, that's why I turn around. I love France. Red, white, and blue. Yeah, see it? I knew it. It's France versus Canada. So they speak French as well. They're I almost said Duolingo. They're bilingual. Or a lot of them are. Okay, so let's go into, now that we know why objections happen, and like from meta level, where are they coming from? What are the normal counters? Why won't those work? You have to keep in mind, if you act like a seller, they're going to treat you like a seller. So if you say these objection counters on a side note, I'm like, it's not that they're good or bad, it's that they're normal. So just like saying, just following up, it's normal. So that's why people log out of the email. They're like, seller. You categorize them. So now that we know the 2 types of objections, or the 3 types of objections, and 2 questions to ask the level of detail, let's go into the 4-step to counter a shallow objection. So within the process, you've uncovered, in your opinion, based on, you're like, the level of detail is low. They sound a little bit pissed. It's a cold call. That they're giving you this objection on. It sounds rushed. There's no narrative behind it. There's no detail behind it. And from what you can assume, they haven't heard of you before. You just kind of came in out of the blue. And you're like, okay, I think this is shallow. There's 4 steps that I take. So the first thing that you have to do is, in both scenarios that we're going to go into, but the first thing you have to do is you have to interrupt the pattern. The pattern that's at play right now between buyer and seller, the most toxic thing to any process is they see you as a seller. But the pattern at play right now is they see you as a seller. So they throw out an objection, and they're expecting that to make you go away. And voila, they're like, send me an email. And you're like, okay. And they're like, that will help me get off the phone. Or they're like, I'm running into a meeting, and I took this call because I thought you were somebody else. Again, most of the time it's a lie. I would ask myself in your head, well, actually, jump in the chat. How many of you, yes or no? Yeah, from the high level, let's say in the last year, have told someone that you were running into a meeting when you weren't running into a meeting? Yes or no? I have. My mom calls me and she's like, I know you're busy, but I'm like, Mimi, you either don't believe I'm busy, or you do believe and you don't care. Just cut it out and get straight into it. So if I notice this is shallow objection, the first thing I have to do is interrupt that pattern. They're expecting that pattern to work, and there is no math that you can do. Like, essentially, when I hear these objection handles in market, and it's so frustrating for me, because I'm like, let's take this for instance. You're like, send me an email. People teach people, say, what should I include in that email? I'm like, okay, let's say that it works for whatever that means. You think that they're going to be like, oh, are you just saying that to make me go away? I'm like, do you think that even if the person said yes, do you think that they'd be like, oh, you know what? You're right. I really don't want to read that email. Now I find value in you. You're not trying to trick someone into taking a meeting. you're trying to add value. So the first step is I have to interrupt that pattern. There is no math. I don't care. I've heard every objection handle on the planet. And the way they're constructed, the first thing you have to do is end the current pattern. They're construction in a way that maybe help us from the mental perspective, but it will not net out and then disrupting their behavior, because you have to first disrupt the pattern that's at bay. So the pattern interrupt that I would use is, there's a number of different examples. Actually, then if you would drop the objection handling one sheeter in the chat, I have an objection handling one sheeter. There's a number of different examples, but you need to stop the current environment of what's going on. Of like, they say, send me an email. You're like, what should I include in that email? They're like, I don't care. And you're like, got it. I'll send it over Thursday at 2. Or they're like, not the right time. And you're like, when's a better time? They're like, oh, and you're like, how's Friday at 9? They're like, got it. That's great. And then they never show up to the meeting. That math will never, ever work. I want to stop the pattern by saying either, I would start with this one. Can I level with you? Or you could say, can we tap the brakes for a second? Or, can I share something? And you want to stop that pattern. I use, can I level with you? It's usually super easy breezy, but I want to stop that pattern. The second step is you want to combine that with what I call elephant in the room. Elephant in the room, if I had a silver bullet from a psych perspective, it would be this. And the reason is you're exiting from child and parent ego state, which can both lie to each other and are both emotional, and you're transitioning in the adult ego state. So adult egos or child and parent can lie to each other, and both of them can be emotional, and they both have the goal of influencing the other one. Adult ego state can't lie. You can't lie when you're adult ego state. You're not unemotional. And the whole goal is on itself to understand more. So that's why people who ask questions, just the stats will yield it. They're more trustworthy because they're trying to understand more. From the psych view, to understand emotional maturity, the biggest predictor or symptom of emotional maturity is how quickly do I make a judgment on something, someone, etc., on how limited amount of information. If you're pretty far along in terms of adult maturity, emotional maturity, when someone says something, you ask questions, not accusatory questions, but to understand more, to know the context, knowing that there's always more detail to the conversation. If you're in child ego state, which I've been in before, you just make a judgment. You're like, that person sucks. He's wrong. He's fast. He's going to win. He's lying, whatever it is. And you hold to those judgments. So the first step is I say, can I level with you? And the elephant in the room is I just, in a very calm and non-accusatory way, say exactly what I think is happening in the room. It is unbelievably effective because you are dealing with what's actually happening in the present here and now with no agenda. So I'd say, I don't know, maybe it's me, but I get the feeling that that's just your polite way of saying, go away, you annoying sales rep. That was a horrible pitch and I really don't want to meet with you, but you just want to be nice to me. Did I get that right? And the key here is that you are non-accusatory and that you're not trying to seek something out. One of the biggest mistakes I see in objection handles is the rep, regardless of what answer you say, is going to keep trying. So I've even seen reps over email say, the person says no, and they're like, can you give me feedback on blah, blah, blah. But the person gets smart. They know what you're trying to do. They know you don't want feedback. You might want it a little bit, but what you really want is to counter. So they just don't answer you. That's why they ghost. They're like, I don't think this person is going to, I don't trust them that they're going to take this as the exact reason. So I'm not going to give them the luxury of the reason. So I'd say, maybe it's me, but I get the feeling that's just your polite way of saying, go away, you annoying sales rep. Those worst pitches I've ever heard. And I really want to tuck the call, but you wanted to be nice to me. I get that right? Incredibly effective. 97% of the time they're going to crack there. And it is really hinged down to, do you say that second half? Most people have no problem saying, can I level with you? I get the feeling that, you're just trying to get me to go away. or they'll accuse them on it. So it needs to be non-accusatory. They're not the bad guy. The objection's not the bad guy. Here's the nice thing. You're not the bad guy either. But the reason they gave the objection is they think you are in the shall objection. 97% of the time they'll crack there and they'll say, yeah, I'm sorry. The third step is I go into empathy, meaning not fake sympathy, but that you understand why they did what they did. Cognitive empathy and emotional empathy are different. Cognitive empathy, a great book is Against Empathy by Paul Bloom. He goes into the differences. Cognitive empathy is you just understand. You understand why they did what they did, but you don't feel any way about it. Emotional empathy is you enter in. So you see someone hit their nail with the hammer and you wince, that's emotional empathy. And he talks about the damage of that, but the value of cognitive empathy. I understand why a marketing team is pissed at sales for not calling on MQLs. I also understand why, because they want the influence pipeline piece, and there's a lot of them. I understand why sales is pissed because they're like, these are garbage leads, because the marketer doesn't care about that, because an MQL, it doesn't matter if they have a valid email. The salesperson does. Why? Because they want to close it. I understand both of those sides. They launch missiles at each other because they only understand their side, right? Both of them are valid. That's empathy. That's cognitive understanding. I don't feel any way about it. I just know it. So at this point, you've uncovered that they've lied to you. So I'd say, I get it. My pitch was bad. I do it to cold callers all the time. How about this? And you go into a prospect pack that we go into in the cold calling session opening ceremonies. You give me the next 20 seconds to give me my best dog and pony show on who we are and why I thought we might be a good fit for you and your team over at blank. At the end of that 20 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. Is that a deal? So the first step is interrupt the pattern. The second step is an elephant in the room. Call out what's happening in a non-accusatory way that's calm and non-agenda driven. When they validate, say, go into empathy, and then go into the prospect pack. So it all sounds like this. Can I level with you? I don't know. Maybe it's me, but I get the feeling that I've been hearing sending email a lot recently, and I don't know. Maybe it's me. I get the feeling it's a polite way of saying, go away, you annoying sales rep. That's the worst pitch I've ever heard. I really just want to get off the call. I get that right? They're like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'd be like, I get it. My pitch probably does need work. And I did that to 2 cold callers earlier. How about this? You give me the next 20 seconds to give my best dog and pony show on who we are and why I thought we might be a good fit for you and your team over blank. At the end of that 20 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. Deal? Right in time. And you can hear those bells going. It's rainy today, so it's super dark, all these clouds over, but that is for shall objection. Incredibly effective. You have to enter in and you have to take the hit, though. Something that's very important. People will say, like, I don't want to call myself annoying. That's low confidence. I'm like, no, that's self-aware. That's why they're not taking the call. Put the confidence that's self-aware of that. That's true reason. So that is the objection handle for shall objections. Let's go into real objections. Real invalid objections. This one I'm actually probably going to be shorter on. You're going to do the same counter for real invalid, but it's with a slight twist. So real invalid, as a reminder, it's a objection that's true, but it's an objection they believe, but it's invalid, meaning it's incorrect. So they say, I'm not the right person, but they're the right buyer persona. They're like, you're the highest in market, but you're lowest price in market. They're like, I'm already using blank. And you're like, we don't compete with them. In this case scenario, you're going to do the same exact counter, but with a twist. In step 2, you're going to take the hit of why they had the wrong information. One of the biggest mistakes I see when it comes to, in my opinion, when it comes to handling invalid objections is the person blows up, like basically says that they're wrong, which is all fine and good. You're like, well, what am I, running a daycare? I'm like, you need to protect the emotional state of the buyer. If nothing else, from a selfish perspective, if you don't, they're going to take care of it for you by hanging up. So at a conference, if a speaker asks a question, like 2% of the people raise their hand, not because only 2% of the people know the answer, but because only 2% are willing to take the risk. It matters to us whether we have the right or wrong answer. And if I do stand up, though, the reason some people do it is if I'm right, there's a huge win. The equal amount of shame of having the wrong answer versus the right answer, it's equal. So that's why some people risk. So I need to invalidate the fact, but I can't invalidate them. So the switch is that at step 2, I'm going to take the blame or the accountability for why they had the wrong answer. So what that sounds like is this. They're like, we're already using blank. I'm like, we don't compete with them at all. You can't say you're wrong. We don't compete with them. You're a dummy, and slap them in the face and then try to ask for the meeting. I would handle it by saying, hey, can I level with you for a second? They'll be like, yeah. So I have to take a drink. I've been hearing that we use blank a lot recently. And I'm getting the feeling it's because of how poorly I'm explaining it. We actually don't compete with blank. So you're taking the hit of why they had the wrong answer. They have the wrong answer, but it's not them, it's you. How about this? You give me the next 20 seconds to do my best talking pony show on how we solve it for your buyer persona, or like it's going to be dependent upon the objection reason of what you're invalidating. Like in this case scenario, if they're saying they're using a competitor on what we actually do, that's a little bit different from blank. And in that 20 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. Is that a deal? So from the high level, this is for real invalid objections. And you got to keep in mind, if it's real and invalid, it's not an objection. It's a reason of why it's not in their best interest to buy. Keep that in your brain. Objection handling, the words kind of bother me because it puts you at odds with your buyer, which I think is 100% the truth in most sales, like in the sales community, but it's the devastation of sales. We're like, it's an objection because they're throwing it at me, because they don't want to buy. And I'm like, yeah, but the reason they might know what they want to do is solve their problems most effectively in the smartest way possible. It's not an objection if you have that agenda, but you don't have that agenda. You're trying to sell. It's an objection for your thing to sell. It might not be an objection for them to accurately solve their problem. So I'm like, how about this? Or can I level with you? I've been hearing we're using blank a lot recently, or I've been hearing I'm not the right person a lot recently. I don't know. Maybe it's me, but I get the feeling it's because of how poorly I'm explaining it. We actually don't compete with blank. We actually, the 97% of our book are to their role. How about this? You give me the next 20 seconds to do my best dog and pony show on what problems we work around with their role. At the end of that 20 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there or not. Deal? Or if it was the competitor one, how about this? You give me the next 20 seconds to give my best dog and pony show on what we actually do. It's a little bit different from blank. End of that 20 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. Deal? So it's the same objection counter, but with the twist of you have to take the hit. Some people will be like, well, I don't want to take the hit. It's not my fault. I'm like, first of all, who cares? Second of all, why does that matter? Third of all, if you don't, they will, and the call's over. It's not that I don't have an ego. It's that I check the ego at the door for the smartest, of like the advantage of the buyer and the advantage of me because of the buyer. So I put the ego aside when I'm walking in the sales room. So that is everything in terms of a voicemail. I'm going to be very quick about this. We're going to close out for the day. So the voicemail, 5 steps to a great voicemail. Why leave a voicemail? How many should you leave? I would leave one at the beginning of the cadence and one at the end, the sequence. You don't want to leave too many because it puts something on the record, but it helps them. It helps make progression towards the effort. So you have to keep in mind in terms of not leaving a voicemail. I've probably got 10 missed calls from random numbers. I have no idea who that is. It's like they didn't exist. So people would be like, what happens if I call that much? And I'm like, they don't know who you are anyway, like meaning there's no harm, no foul. In this case, I don't even know who it is. So that's to the good of if you called a bunch, it's to the negative of even though we've done an action and we feel like we've made progress or invested in the account, I don't know, they haven't. I don't know who that person is. They're at square zero with me. So I'm using a voicemail. So the voicemail from the top is essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to call out who you are to give them context. You're trying to point them to the reason of personalization. Then you're going to give them context on that you sent them an email and instruct them to go to the email, not to call you back. The funny thing is, if you're going to get a call back, it's going to be because you told someone not to. It took off that guilt. So what that sounds like is this. Hi, Brian. Like, let's use Brian Boitano. Hi, Brian. This is Beck Holland, that annoying sales rep who's been sending you a bunch of emails. The reason for my outreach is, let's do a content download reason as a trigger, for instance. The reason for my outreach is I saw that you downloaded this piece of content on blank a couple of days ago. And more importantly, I went to your profile and I saw you wrote this great article on X, Y, and Z. I really, on a side note, like this line on X, Y, and Z. So I wrote you an email about it. No need to call me back. But if you go to the email and check it out, and if you want to go back and forth, we can take it up from there. Either way, keep the great articles coming. I have learned a lot from you of like whatever the push-pull language is that you're going to include there. Either way, this was a great company move that you had. Really appreciate the time, and hope you're having a great rest of your day. Okay, bye, and end it. So you're trying to instruct them of like, this is who I am, and I would take the hit. Everyone's like, oh, is that tough? I'm like, take the hit. You are the annoying sales rep. Give the personalization. That's the most important part, arguably, of why you're reaching, like, of what it is about them. If you have a trigger of like the content downloads, for instance, you can include that. Then point them back to the context of the email, say, no need to call me back, and close it out. So that's what the voicemail is from top to bottom. What that will increase, it will not increase people calling you back. What it will increase for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is the response to your email. Unbelievable response rate. I'm talking like 80, 85%, they won't call you back, but they'll go back and forth with your email. The one objection that you can't counter is the one that we most often get, which is silence. So that's what you're trying to do, is trying to invest in them, show them that you invested in them with the personalization reason, and that there is some context. And you're essentially proving that you have put some into them before today, and trying to get that conversation going over the email. That's the goal. No one's going to call back, not for the right reasons, the appropriate reason. At least no one that I've ever seen. We can't get them to call us back for the wrong reasons, of like they're scared or they have a misunderstanding about something. But we're trying to get them to call us back. We're trying to get a conversation going based on the context we've had previously. So that's everything. I can't believe I finished 2 pieces of pie, and with 32 seconds to spare. Thanks so much for coming. You hear the rowdy Italians in the background. Something's going on with the colors of my walls right now. And then I think we need to fix the camera. Fix the camera. I hope everyone is doing super well. That is day 7. Tune in tomorrow. We are going to be going back to selling, and we have a very interesting / important logistical topic that I think a lot of people will like. It's more of a logistical topic, but it's certainly important. It is the day in the life of a top performing AE. How do I construct my day? What do I do? When do I do it? How much? When do I do internal meetings? When do I do self-prospecting? What does a day in the life of a top performing AE look like? What do they study? When do they study it? Do they do call research, follow up, all of that tomorrow? So we're going to be covering all that tomorrow. And hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Prep for Friday the 13th. Get out your ammo. Watch her on the corner, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Ciao.